Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Colin Demarest. It's that most wonderful time of the year, the annual Pentagon budget request season. Each year, the White House releases its annual fiscal plan, including the proposed Department of Defense allocation. This year, the Pentagon requested $850 billion in funding, a similar amount to last year, and to kick things off, the Pentagon hosted a string of announcements on the details. Things started off with a fiery address from Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks, who admonished Congress for never passing the 2024 budget request, instead just operating on a series of temporary extensions.
As I stand before you today, Congress has not yet passed the FY24 defense budget. So before I begin, I want to highlight how devastating the failure to pass last year's budget request is to ensuring our national defense and global security. Last year, the department released the most strategy-aligned budget in DoD history. Congress's inability to pass the FY24 budget, holding back much-needed funding, hinders our ability to execute that strategy. CRs are a significant constraint on our ability to advance our defense strategy, forcing the department to operate with one hand tied behind our back for months out of the year. Our military readiness depends on our ability to pass timely appropriations, so I cannot emphasize this enough. We need predictable, adequate, sustained, and timely funding. So we urge Congress to work together to pass this budget request and last year's and the National Security Supplemental too, with the requisite urgency that our nation's defense demands.
Regardless of the status of the 2024 request, the 2025 fiscal year is already on the horizon. And for a branch-by-branch look at what's in the package, we turn to our reporters for analysis. First up, the Army, where personnel items were front and center. Defense News Land Warfare reporter Jen Judson breaks down that branch's 2025 request.
So the Army has come out with yet another flat budget of $185.9 billion. That's just up $400 million from last year's FY24 request here in FY25. I think some of the major areas that the Army will be funding, a big focus on personnel, $70.7 billion. They're going to be spending nearly $1 billion on barracks at 9 different sites. It's a huge priority for them, up 41% over last year's funding for barracks. That's $935 million. End strength is still down. They're planning for a budget of 442,300 active soldiers. That was down from FY24, which was 452,000. And the Guard will again be at 325,000 and reserves at 175,800. Two major cancellations expected in the FY25 budget when it comes to modernization. The first already announced, already out there, but the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft has been canceled in favor of funding procurement for UH-60 Blackhawks and CH-47 Chinooks, as well as unmanned aircraft systems to help fill in that role. And the Army's decided to cancel the Extended Range Cannon Artillery Program, or ERCA, but they are going to be buying quite a bit of missiles in FY25, $1.2 billion for Gimler's rockets. That's probably the biggest buy that they've made in many years. 230 PAC-3 MSE missiles, as well as 230 PRISM missiles, which are the brand new long-range ATACMS replacement. So that's coming online. Quite a few new missiles coming online, as well as a mid-range capability missile.
And now to the Navy. The Sea Service this year fought with whether to fund future systems or put money into current capabilities, given its missions in the Red Sea and Indo-Pacific. Reporter Megan Eckstein tells us which side won out.
The U.S. Navy is looking at a pretty flat budget for fiscal year 25. They have a $257.6 billion top line, which is only a 0.7% increase compared to the 2024 request. Due to the tight budget nature, as well as ongoing operations in the Red Sea and a concern that there could be conflict in the Pacific in the coming years, the Navy is very focused on current readiness and any systems that could be fielded in the next year or two. And so as a result, under this tight budget, the Navy is postponing a lot of future development and modernization programs. For example, the FAXX Future Fighter, which is part of the Navy's Next Generation Air Dominance program, is actually being pushed back quite a bit. In 24, they asked for $1.5 billion for development, and in the 25 budget, they're only asking for $500 million. Really an example of how tight funding is right now and the extent to which the Navy is looking to prioritize current and near-term priorities and being forced to delay future capabilities. There's also a large unmanned surface vessel that the Navy had planned to start buying in 2025. That's actually seeing a 2-year delay for similar reasons. Another way the tight budget manifested itself is in the undersea profile. The Navy says that they are heavily invested in undersea capabilities. However, they were expecting to buy 2 submarines in 2025, and they've only purchased 1. These are the Virginia-class attack submarines, and the Navy's been buying them at 2 a year since fiscal 2011. They've talked about the importance of buying on this regular cadence, the importance of having stable funding for industry, and yet, because of the tight nature of this year's budget, they are only buying 1. However, the Navy says that they are not going to disrupt the supply chain, and in fact, they are asking for $3.9 billion in fiscal 25 and $11.1 billion over the next 5 years, not even for submarines, but specifically to shore up the supply chain. One of the big challenges the U.S. Navy faces in the 2025 budget is ongoing operations in the Red Sea. When the October 7th attack in Israel happened and the subsequent Houthi missile and drone attacks throughout the Red Sea region began later in October, the 2025 budget was actually almost all the way written and vetted higher up in the Department of Defense and the White House. And so this budget being released actually does not account for the higher rate of using missiles, the higher rate of using surface ships, such as destroyers. It's not accounting for all the ship maintenance that will be required when those ships come back from their deployments. And so the Navy has actually raised the idea of needing to request a supplemental spending package to Congress at some point later on in the coming months.
Now to the Air Force, where leaders looked to balance future capabilities with current mission sets. One casualty, older fighter jets. Sorry, A-10 fans, but retirements of those and other planes are on the way.
The Air Force is requesting a fiscal 2025 budget of $188 billion. That's $3 billion more than their fiscal 2024 budget, but at a 1.6% increase, doesn't really keep up with inflation, and top service officials made note of that. They were constrained by the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which caps spending increases throughout the government, including at the Defense Department, and Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall made it clear that meant that there were a lot of trade-offs they had to make. The Air Force ended up proposing a budget increase for research, development, test, and evaluation of about $1.5 billion, bringing it up to $37.7 billion, but procurement would fall by $1.6 billion to $29 billion. And we saw how that's going to play out in some really tight aircraft acquisitions. The number of F-35As is procured in 2025 would shrink from the expected 48 to 42. F-15EXs would go down from what they had anticipated, 24 to 18. The Air Force is also planning to retire 250 aircraft in 2025, which it says would allow it to save about $2 billion. That would include 56 A-10 Warthogs, 65 F-15C and D fighters, 26 F-15Es that have an older, less capable engine, and 11 F-16 fighters. The Air Force is also planning to take another run at retiring 32 F-22s that are the Block 20 model, which it says would not be capable of flying in combat. Congress has so far blocked the Air Force's efforts to retire some of those Block 20 F-22s.
And in the Marines, barracks improvements are a huge priority for 2025, but can they afford all the changes they want to make? Marine Corps Times' Irene Lowenson has the details.
The Marine Corps has requested a total of $274 million for restoring subpar barracks. That's an increase of $65 million. But is it enough? Even that additional money would fall short of the total that the service needs for fixing its barracks issues. The Marine Corps has estimated its backlog of deferred maintenance, which are issues in its facilities that it has put off addressing because of budget constraints, amounts to more than $15.8 billion. The Corps said in an internal memo we've reviewed that it needs to spend about $1.5 billion a year on restoring barracks. Meanwhile, the service's barracks often fall short of the military's own standards. Many Marines are living with broken down furniture, and some have reported mold and other health concerns. The Marine Corps has promised to make improving its barracks a priority, but money is tight. A Marine spokesman told us the first step is assessing how the barracks are being used before pouring money into them. The barracks are at a little over half occupancy. The Marine spokesman told us, simply put, we have too many facilities and need to ensure we are making smart investments. For Marine Corps Times, I'm Irene Lowenson.
Lastly, my domain. Pentagon is seeking $14.5 billion for cyberspace activities, including the further installation of sensitive networks and research into automated defenses. Fiscal 2025 ask is $1 billion more than the Biden administration's previous ask. The U.S. is spending on cyber as cat-and-mouse competition with Russia and China goes increasingly digital. Among the big tickets are $977 million for Zero Trust, a cybersecurity paradigm that assumes networks are always at risk or already breached, and $300 million for ICAM, or Identity, Credential, and Access Management.